Good morning to you all. A happy Fun Friday, as always. And today's LinkedIn Live session, Quick Step to Happier Customers, episode 9, is all about emotional intelligence. But before I go any further, it would be great to know if I've got some people joining me live this morning. And if you are, then hopefully you've got your cuppa at the ready. I certainly have, because I definitely need that when I'm doing so much talking. But if you are with me at the moment, it'd be lovely just to say, a quick hello to you. Just let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I don't know you're here because that is the downside of doing a LinkedIn Live. You can't see who your audience is. So it would be great just to know that I've got some people here on this bit of a cloudy, bit of a sunny Friday morning in Malvern in Worcestershire, which is where I am. What's happened to our summer? Hopefully it'll arrive sooner rather than later. But as I say, if you are here with me this morning, just pop a quick hello in the comments. And of course, I welcome any questions as well. Oh, good to know hubby is with me. I can always count on hubby's support. Any questions at all as we go through this next 30 minutes or so? As I say, it's all about emotional intelligence. Then I do welcome your questions. But of course, it's emotional intelligence and the link to it in terms of service excellence, because obviously that's what these LinkedIn Live series is all about. So I'm just going to switch off the banner at the bottom, the hi people, if it's on full time. And I'm just going to bring up some slides. So as I say, as I'm going through, be great to know, if you have any questions, or just say a quick hello to the customer service dancing queen, which is always appreciated. Welcome to you as well, Robert. Good morning to you. Hope you've had a really good week. Also as well, Robert, I've got my next Trainer Connect network, if I can speak, meeting on Monday. So if you are available, it'd be great to see you there as well. So why am I talking about emotional intelligence? Well, first of all, let's sort of talk about what it is. And I'm going to be sort of talking about the originators model of emotional intelligence. Many of you will be familiar with Daniel Goleman, but actually the term emotional intelligence was originated by Peter Salovey and John Mayer. And they sort of break emotional intelligence down into 4 key elements: perceiving emotions, how good we are at observing other people's emotions, for example, through facial expressions; how effective we are at using our emotions in different situations and different tasks. So it's not about necessarily seeing positive or negative emotions. It's actually just about understanding how we're feeling. And even with anger, being able to utilize that anger in an effective, positive way rather than potentially a negative way. So often we talk about negative emotions because it's the actions that are negative, not necessarily the emotion itself, as long as we utilize that emotion in a positive way. Glad to hear all is good with you, Robert. And also emotional intelligence talks about understanding emotions. So being self-aware, understanding how we're feeling at any moment in time, but also knowing what our triggers are, being able to, vocalize, to be able to explain clearly how we're actually feeling rather than just saying, oh, I'm okay, or I'm fine, thank you, to be able to have a good emotional vocabulary to express ourselves. But what I'm going to be talking about today is managing emotions, particularly when you're working in customer service, because anybody who works in a customer service capacity, whether it's in a contact center or any other environment such as hospitality, etc., it can be a very stressful environment when you're dealing with customer after customer, particularly when those, some of those customers may not be very happy because of complaints, etc. It's how we often manage our own emotions, as well as understanding the emotions that our customers are expressing as well. But why is it important? There's lots of research out there now around the benefits of emotional intelligence. Many of those are often linked to leadership benefits, but there's also enough research to show that when customer service advisors have, a strong level of emotional intelligence, they're better equipped to be able to empathize and understand customers' emotions. So we often talk about empathy, and empathy should always be expressed with sincerity. So none of this, oh, I understand, or I know how you feel, but really sort of letting that customer know you can hear how frustrated they are, and you absolutely are going to do your very best to help and support, and clearly, if it is a complaint, to help to try and resolve that complaint as quickly and as effectively as possible for them. Because empathy isn't just about the phrase that you say to a customer, it's very much about the actions that follow. What is the point of saying that you can hear a customer's frustration or anger and you want to do your very best, but then the actions that follow that particular phrase aren't actions which really does show a customer that you really understand their situation and how they're feeling. So when you have a good level of emotional intelligence, one of the elements of that is having a good level of empathy. So it's not about you, it's about the customer, or it's about your colleague. I can remember a colleague I used to work with in my previous career, that whenever you went to her with any sort of issue or problem, immediately within about 30 seconds, it would be, oh, let me tell you about a time when that isn't empathy. That's bringing that conversation round to yourself and your own situation, when actually it's about really listening and understanding the other person. But it's also about being able to effectively communicate and be able to pick up on those emotional cues. So it's about active listening. It's about listening to the tone, because some customers will tell you how they're feeling. Many won't necessarily label that emotion, but you'll be able to pick up on those emotional cues through the tone and through the language that a customer is expressing. Another aspect of emotional intelligence, when we are equipped with empathy, we're also then, in a better position to resolve conflict, problem solve again, because we can understand other people's perspectives, not just our own, and particularly from a customer perspective, being able to really understand our customer's position from their point of view. So even though a customer may be expressing anger, and we might be thinking, well, I think, if I was in that situation, I wouldn't be feeling that way. It doesn't matter. That customer is expressing that emotion. And, I'll talk a little bit more about this later. We never quite know what's going on in that customer's life that might be driving that emotion. And so it's important to understand it from that customer's perspective. But of course, I've already said that working in customer service, particularly my background of 27 years working in contact centres, I absolutely know how stressful and how resilient we need to be, as I say, when we are going through various emotions with customers. Sometimes we take on that customer's emotion. So, for example, when and I have talked about recently, back in the early days of my career at 20 years of age, working in insurance claims, and I was speaking to a customer that I absolutely knew, because the doctor diagnosed them with depression, was telling me that the delay in their claim was making that depression worse. They were having suicidal thoughts, and they were feeling that this delay could tip them over the edge. And I'll never forget that conversation, but I also remember the impact it had on me and my emotions. So being equipped to be able to deal with our own emotions, our own stress management and resilience is an important part of delivering service excellence. But also, if we are delivering that service excellence, we're not allowing emotions to take over, our mindset, that we aren't delivering, a lower level of service because those emotions are affecting us. Then if we can keep on top of those emotions by managing them and using effective strategies, then we in turn as employees and then as a business are going to be delivering higher customer satisfaction. And there are studies to show that companies where employees have a good level of emotional intelligence, that results often in higher customer satisfaction ratings, and increased customer loyalty. So certainly enough benefits there. And, if you're listening to this right now and you've come across some of those benefits within your organization, or, some of the benefits that, that you've seen yourself because you've developed emotional intelligence skills, I'd love to hear from you. So do pop them into the comments for me to share. But talking about managing our emotions, it starts with self-awareness. And I've just noticed a typo. Yes, I am aware. Awareness has got an E after the R. That just goes to show how busy a week I've had this week. But in terms of knowing how we're feeling and our level of self-awareness, it starts with knowing how emotions affect ourselves, because as individuals, how frustration might feel to me might be very different to how frustration feels to yourself. When you get nervous or anxious, some people have sort of redness in this area, they may become flushed. It might be as well that, if you get nervous, it can affect your tummy. I know we get often those we describe as butterflies, but how we actually feel those emotions will differ amongst different people. But also, when we think about emotions, it's not just about our mental state, but it's also about how those emotions affect the rest of our body in terms of our energy levels. So I'm going to introduce you to my mood meter. Well, not my mood meter personally. I didn't develop it, but I came across it many years ago when I was learning about emotional intelligence. And how I started to use it was at the beginning of each day, I would ask myself where I sit on that mood meter in terms of my emotions. So in terms of how happy I am, so the happier I am, we're going to move over to the right to that scale towards the green zone. But also if my energy levels are high as well, then I might then go up from the green up to the yellow zone. If I'm not that happy, perhaps, something has happened outside of work that's affecting me, then I may be down towards the blue area. But also if my energy levels are heightened, have you ever noticed when you're feeling really angry about something, your energy levels are usually higher as well. Hence, we then move towards the red area. Now, of course, there are some sort of feelings, moods that are mentioned in the mood meter, but even if you just go with the colours, it's a good starting place. Just to ask yourself at the start of the day, where am I on the mood meter? How am I actually feeling? So if I'm in the green zone, the next question to follow is, how can I maintain that emotion for as long as I can? And how can I change it if I'm perhaps in the blue or the red zone? Because if I don't change that emotion in terms of managing it, then potentially that could have an impact on my performance throughout the course of the day, as well as the impact on my customers. But I'm not necessarily an early morning person, so I might be in the green zone, but I might need to sort of work on things I can do to actually increase my energy level to get up there in the yellow zone as soon as possible. But the way you use this is then periodically throughout the day, you just pause and reflect and think, where am I now in terms of how I'm feeling? And it's just a way to start checking in on a more regular basis to really understand how you're feeling at any moment, but then to think about strategies that you can put into place in the moment that can help you to manage those emotions, rather than just suppressing them, ignoring them, going through the day as best you can and hope that you get to the end of the day in a better mood. Well, that's not emotional intelligence. So it's about asking ourselves, how are we feeling? If it's our energy levels, what can we do to perhaps boost our energy levels, such as it might be going and getting some fresh air. It might even be just standing up from our chair if we've been sitting for long periods of time. But if it's more around how we're feeling mentally, in terms of we're feeling frustrated, for example, then what's triggered that emotion and what can we control or influence about that event that's triggered that emotion, so that we can then manage it. But again, I'm going to be sharing some tips in terms of how to manage that during this session as well. But to become more self-awareness, starting with something like a mood meter, just to be more in tune with how we're feeling, Or you can have apps on your phone. There is a mood meter app. I think you do have to pay for it, but the one I've got is a free one, which is an Android app. Actually, their name has just gone out of my head now. I will look it up in a moment. But in terms of that, way of, I guess, using our technology in a positive way is about perhaps having some apps on our phone that we can then just at any point in day just say how we're feeling. But the great thing about apps is they can also enable you to put more information in, such as triggers. And the more we get familiar with what our key triggers are, the better placed we are to then manage emotions in the future. Because if there's a particular trigger that we know is going to happen again and again, then we can think about strategies before that situation even happens in the future. So a fun thing to do, I guess, in terms of then either using the mood meter or using an app on your actual phone. But it's also important to understand the part perception plays in our emotions. So our emotions come from an event that's happened. And if you think about all the events that happen through your day, a conversation you have with a customer, a conversation you have with a colleague, an announcement by the business, lots of events take place in the course of the day, and you will have an immediate thought. That thought comes from your subconscious mind. And that thought will either be positive or negative, perhaps something you like, something you agree with, something that you disagree with, or something that you dislike. And I've just thought of that app. It's coming to my mind. Mood Flow is the one that I've got on my phone. So back to this in terms of, where your emotions come from. So recognizing the impact of our own thoughts on how we feel. So we have a thought, and then if it's a positive thought, we're more likely to have a positive feeling attached to it. Now, that emotion doesn't come minutes after that thought. It's pretty much instant, but the two go very much hand in hand together. But we don't all have the same perception about those events. You could go to the same party as 50 of your colleagues and walk away with a very different perception of how good that party was, depending on your own likes and dislikes, your own values, your own beliefs, etc. So your subconscious, that knows you really well, understands your thinking in terms of what it is that you're expecting from that party and whether or not that is achieved. So recognizing that when an event occurs, that is our first perception. That's our instant perception. That doesn't have to be our long-term reality, because what I'm going to talk about next is when you have that instant reaction to something. And that could be, for example, a business change that's been announced within an organization, which then could affect how you feel for the rest of the day, which could then have an impact on how you communicate with your customers. But your initial thought may not be, a positive one. You may be worried about that particular change that will then link to negative feelings. But you can press that pause button after that initial reaction and ask yourself, yeah, okay, that is my perception, but is that the reality? So, for example, it might be that your perception is based on not having the full facts or the full information. So, a positive action could be, I need to find the detail that sits behind this change, or perhaps I need to book a one-to-one meeting with my manager just to learn a little bit more about the why, what's triggered that particular announcement, or what's triggered that particular change, so that actually with a better understanding I might think and feel differently about that situation. But there's lots of other ways in which we can reframe our thinking. And it's just about looking at that initial perception as what it is. It is just our perception. But can we change that perception into a different reality for ourselves? So there's a couple of ways that I'm going to explain in terms of how we can do that and some examples of reframing. But again, I'd love to know if you've got any thoughts or any examples of reframing that you've done yourself recently that has changed your thought and therefore changed your thinking. And while you're sort of thinking about that, I'm just going to take a little sip of my cuppa. But of course, do let me know if you're here with me as well. Just say a quick hello. That would be great. So I mentioned already change is a big, I guess, trigger for many people's emotions. So we all think about and adapt to change differently and at different paces. But any change in an organization can impact how we think, how we feel, and therefore how we interact with our customers and with our colleagues. And so instantly you may be thinking about the negatives or the concerns about a change that's been announced. But once you've done that initial negative thinking, taking a step back and then pausing and thinking, is there one potential benefit, one potential positive that this change is going to bring to myself, to my customers, to my colleagues, so that you start to focus away from the negatives and you start to focus your attention in that, even that one opportunity that that change might present. Because when you focus on that one positive, again, that's going to give you that proactive, positive thought mindset and therefore actions. A difficult customer call or a different, if you're not working in a contact center, you work face to face, a difficult customer interaction can easily trigger our emotions, but they can also trigger the customer's heightened emotion. And again, I remember a very wise manager saying to me many, many years ago when I came off a very difficult call and, I was getting myself frustrated with a customer. And that manager said, if you knew that customer had, financial worries, they were worried about their next mortgage payment, they'd had a recent bereavement in their family, would that have made any difference to how you would have adapted to that conversation? And it just took me, that step back to think, yes, absolutely, I'd be more understanding, I'd be more patient. So most customers won't tell you what's going on in their lives. And I was delivering a vulnerable customer training course this week. And one of the employees there sort of shared with me a situation where she was speaking to an elderly customer who had that heightened emotion. They were very angry from the start of the conversation. And the issue was around a problem with their door. And yes, the advisor, was trying to help and explain to the customer, what action she would take, but it wouldn't usually have been the issue that it was with that door, wouldn't have usually been an immediate emergency. But the more that she was talking to him, the more he started to open up and share that he'd injured his foot recently. He had a hospital appointment. His taxi hadn't turned up, so he was getting himself really worried about not being able to attend the appointment. He was struggling with living alone because quite recently he'd lost his wife of, I think it was 50 years. So he'd gone from, that 50-year support with his wife to suddenly being on his own, having to deal with everything himself. The impact as well of having this injury, being worried about the hospital appointment, and all of that was driving the emotion, not the door, but actually that customer situation. So if we're working customer service, it's important to recognize where might that anger be coming from. This might be a vulnerable customer that you're speaking to. So before we jump into, will you calm down? And, that really assertive approach, can we try and understand? Now, of course, if the customer continues and they may be verbally abusive, then of course we need to manage that. But I'm talking about just understanding that customer and that potential trigger, to show that empathy and that patience initially. And of course, if if we work in customer service, we won't know the answers to every scenario and every question. So sometimes we get frustrated with ourselves. It can affect our mood. If we're struggling in a particular area, perhaps we've just gone through a training course, we know with a new system, and we're just not picking it up as quickly as our colleagues are. But sometimes, and I've noticed this in my career, sometimes people allow those emotions to build because they're afraid to ask for help when they need it, because they see asking for help as a weakness. I want you to reframe that if that's ever a mindset that you experience or your colleagues experience, and reframe that to that's actually showing dedication to wanting to deliver the very best level of service, to be the best that you can be, and the right action to take in order to show that dedication is to ask for help when you need the help. So just think about that one for a moment. Another situation that can affect our emotions is when we make mistakes or we fail at something. And that word failure and the impact it can have. I'm sure many of you are aware of that very famous Thomas Edison quote, "I've not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Now, whether that's actually true or not, or an exaggeration, but the concept behind it is when we make a mistake, when we don't get something right first time, rather than beating ourselves up and allowing that to affect us negatively in terms of our emotions, and we become frustrated, actually seeing that as an opportunity to receive valuable feedback, because we are now one step closer to success. We have identified an action that potentially isn't effective, doesn't work, or we haven't quite got it right first time, but we've now learned that, and therefore we've received that valuable feedback. And the next time we try, we are that one step closer to actually getting the success that we're looking for. So what is negative about that? If you think about all the instances in your career where you've learned from your mistakes, I'm sure there's many. I certainly can recall lots of times when that's happened. And we learn from our mistakes as much, or sometimes even more, as we do when we are actually getting things right first time. So again, I'd like you to think if there's anything that you could put into place quite quickly within your role in terms of reframing. So think about your triggers. Think about what initially triggers that negative thought and negative emotion for you. And I'd like you to think about the next time that happens. Yes, you might have the initial thought exactly the same because it's triggered by your subconscious, but your conscious mind can then choose how you continue to think and feel about that situation. So how might you reframe it in the future so that you're prepared for that eventuality, and you've already even thought about how you might think and feel and react differently to it. So again, any questions at all based on anything I've said, I do welcome them. So I'm just going to finish off with some other strategies. So reframing is fantastic for changing your thinking, because if you change your thought, you change your feeling. But if it's a struggle to change your thinking, then you might have to zone in on the actual emotion itself. So breathing exercises. So you've come off a difficult customer call. So just taking a few minutes just to do some gentle breathing. And again, you can go on to YouTube, and there's lots of breathing techniques that you can see, and find the one that works for you. There is a very simple one that you can do, which is tracing your fingers on your hand. And as you go up, you breathe in. As you go down a finger, you breathe out, and you do that slowly all the way around, and then go back the other way. And that wouldn't take any more than a couple of minutes to do. And if you're working from home, then nobody's going to see that you're doing that. Very important to take your breaks. If you are making excuses, I haven't got time to take a break, and you're already feeling stressed, you're feeling frustrated, then not taking your breaks is not going to help you to change that thinking and change that feeling. So making sure we're looking after ourselves is an important part of emotional intelligence. But also, if you have come off a difficult customer call, not being afraid to ask your team leader, and even if you're working from home, so you're not in the same location as your manager, but being able to send a WhatsApp, pick up the phone, send a quick message just to say, I just need 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes, just to take a breather because I've just experienced this really difficult customer call that's affected me. Practicing positive self-talk. We often focus on the negatives. We beat ourselves up about the things we're not very good at yet or we're struggling with. And again, that can affect our mood, our feelings throughout the course of a working day. So just reminding ourselves of the things we are good at, that we are great at, that we have got better at, in the space of a couple of weeks through the learning that we've done, the training courses that we've attended, but just being a little bit kinder to ourselves, because our mind talk impacts our thoughts and therefore our feelings and therefore our actions. But making sure that we are not suppressing our emotions, we're finding those trusted people, not like that colleague I mentioned a little while ago that turned the conversation round to her. Those colleagues that are really good listeners that we can go to during our breaks, etc., or even our team leader, and just share openly how we're feeling and being open and honest to be able to express those emotions, but also to get the support that we need. Now, the mood meter I talked about earlier is very much about owning our own emotions. I said, as soon as we recognize how we're feeling, the questions that follow should be, how do I try and maintain that feeling, or how do I change it? So it is important that we take ownership of managing our own emotions, but sometimes having support can help us to achieve that. So talking to others is certainly a strategy that I would always encourage, rather than becoming withdrawn from your team. And the last thing that I want to mention is the importance of focusing our efforts and our thoughts on what we can control and what we can influence. Because when I'm coaching people, often when they share with me 3 or 4 things that they're worried about, they're frustrated about, etc., I help them to recognize which of those 3 or 4 things they have some influence or control over. Of course, number one thing we always have control over is ourselves, in terms of our own thoughts and our own actions. But also recognizing the things that we can influence within our working environments, but recognizing and accepting the things that we can't control and we can't influence. So once we recognize the one thing potentially that exists, but we can't do anything about, we can then, I guess that can help us to then accept that situation. Doesn't mean it isn't there, but we can accept it, because we can then again be proactive and focus on the 1 or 2 things we can influence and we can control. And we can do some of those things by, as I say, reframing our thinking, speaking to others, using those sort of breathing techniques, but really recognizing that we can, if we choose to, take ownership of our own thoughts and our own feelings and our own actions. Is that always easy to do? No, it's not. But is it worthwhile investing in developing your emotional intelligence skills and equipping within yourself, within your team, within your business, so that everybody in your organization has the strategies to identify how they're feeling, become more self-awareness, but also understand their triggers, but also have those strategies and techniques to utilize in the moment, rather than ignoring the feelings, suppressing the feelings, or just plowing ahead through the day and hoping for the very best. But all those interactions potentially that we've had with colleagues and with customers potentially have had a negative impact on ourselves, those customers, and our organizations. So hopefully I've given you some thoughts, some strategies, some techniques that you can quickly utilize within the course of your working days and weeks. And of course, if you want to learn more about my emotional intelligence training courses, then you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn, or send me an email to info@turnercorner.co.uk. But in terms of going forward as an individual or as a business, I would always recommend that when you deliver any sort of customer service training, that you also include emotional intelligence, which is why it's always included in my customer service courses. So hopefully I've given you sort of food for thought. But any questions before I sort of finish off? I have gone over the 30 minutes, but you know me by now, I am a talker. But, as I say, do check out, as I say, the Mood Flow app. I'm sure there's an iPhone equivalent for it as well, to help you to start recording your triggers effectively and becoming more self-aware. In a couple of weeks' time, so 2 weeks this Friday, I will be joined by my fantastic guest, and associate, the lovely Nina Goldsworthy Griffiths. And we will be talking about insights. So the impact that insights discovery has on the service delivered to your customers. So if insights is something you're interested in learning more about, do join me in a couple of weeks. I will be sending out some invites as well, but do look out for those posts over the next couple of weeks. But also, if you haven't joined in on the Friday playlist post as yet, that has been published about an hour and a half ago. Go and check out your favorite 80 songs. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Peter, as always. Happy. And thank you, Robert. And anybody else that has joined. Sometimes I don't always see all the comments. So if you have popped a comment in and I haven't responded, I'm not ignoring you. It's just I haven't seen it. But if you have joined me this morning, then thank you ever so much. And if you're watching this as a recording, then I welcome all feedback as well. Wonderful, Robert. Happy Friday and happy weekend to you as well. But that's it from the Customer Service Dancing Queen for another LinkedIn Live series. But as I say, watch out for me in a couple of weeks' time with the lovely Nina Goldsworthy Griffiths. Bye for now.